Hi, good evening, everyone. So, welcome to another session of Leverage TV. I am Tarun Singh. I am a senior manager at Leverage Edu. So, today we will be talking about the topic how to live on a budget when studying overseas. Obviously, this is a very important topic. I have struggled with this when I studied abroad. So, we are going to try our best to dissect this and give you guys the best insights on how you can make savings when studying abroad, and also the things that you should think about when selecting the country or the city that you're planning to choose in, right, to study in, so that you can make the correct decision according to your budget and need. So before I begin, the first thing I wanted to cover and let everybody know, especially those students who are planning to go study abroad, is that you should know what are the main constituents of the expenses of going to study abroad. So firstly, there are three major expenses that you should understand. The first one is your tuition fees. Generally, your tuition fees would cover around 50% of your entire cost of going to study abroad, and then the remainder of your 50% would generally be divided equally between your accommodation. So how much you spend on your accommodation, and the last 25% is basically what you spend on your living expenses. So generally that includes food and groceries. That generally forms the bulk of it. um, so these are the three main expenses when you go to study abroad. So what we will do is we'll dissect each of these and try to understand how you can make cost savings in each of these. But before that, I think it's important that students also understand, how choosing the correct country or city to live in, how that can impact your entire, budget as well. So making that decision is also super important. So when you select your course, when you select your country, I think that can play a major part in determining the overall cost that you're gonna end up spending. So this is where it's important to connect with your Leverage Edu counselor and understand the pros and cons in terms of expenses of going to each country, right? And so, for example, if nowadays there are a lot of students who are going to Germany these days. So Germany tends to be a country which offers free education, or the education is highly subsidized, which means that majorly students only expenses are their living expenses, right? So and similarly, if students do consider going to the UK, for example, that's again, the master's degrees in UK are usually just 1 year, which means that students can save a lot of money, because if you go to US, if you go to maybe Canada, generally the master's program could be of 2 years of length, so could be significantly higher, right? So if you go to the UK, you save that one extra year, not just of tuition cost but living cost as well, right? So choosing the country is super important. And then once you choose the country, even choosing the city that you are actually planning to study in is also going to contribute largely to your expenses. For example, if you choose to study in New York, um, it's going to be much more expensive. Or if you choose to study in London, your living expenses would probably be twice as much as maybe going to smaller cities like Birmingham and Nottingham, right? So these are some things that students should keep in mind when selecting their course. Um, another thing that really helps to sort of dampen the blow of the expenses of studying abroad is actually part-time work. So I highly encourage that all students consider and really look into part-time work when they study abroad, because students generally can work up to 20 hours per week, which if you calculate it, like in the UK, for example, the minimum wage is usually around £9. So at 20 hours per week, a student can earn about £180, which is £720 per month. And if you calculate it for the full year, it's almost £10,000 that a student can earn part time. Because you can work 20 hours per week during your university time, and then when you are on holidays or when you have vacation periods, you can even work full time. So if you calculate all, it becomes around £10,000, and that generally that is enough to cover your entire living expenses. So part-time work has huge benefits when it comes to saving on costs when studying abroad. In fact, it will leave you with very little expenditure except your tuition fees to kind of cover. Now I'm gonna deep dive into the three major costs which students incur when going to study abroad, and how maybe it could be possible to make some cost savings in each one of them. So like I mentioned before, the three major costs that students generally incur is tuition, food, and accommodation. These are the three major areas where your money would end up going. So when it comes to tuition, um, like I had mentioned earlier, so it's important to consider the different countries that you could probably opt for. If you go to Germany, you could save and maybe get a free education. If you go to UK, you have a 1 year master's, and you have fees which is ranging anywhere from £12,000 to £20,000. Um, so it's up to you which university you want the fee range that you want to opt for, right, in terms of university. So you can actually opt for universities which are a lot cheaper than maybe other universities. So you need to do your homework well. Again, this is somewhere where your Leverage Edu counselor can really help and give you those cheaper options. Another a way to kind of save on your tuition fee is for example, by finding the right course. So if you actually find the right course, then maybe you might find a university which rather than going to the best possible university or the highest ranked university, sometimes if you find the correct course at the right university, you could actually end up saving a lot of money when kind of going abroad. So also when students generally go to say USA, for example, it's important to understand that if you study in the US, if you go to private universities, they tend to be a lot more expensive, and if you go to public universities, they can be a lot cheaper. So again, these are ways in which you can kind of lower your tuition fee by making sure you choose the correct institution that you study at. Lastly, we will come to scholarships. So scholarships is obviously a huge factor, and all students highly consider going on scholarships when they do study abroad. Um, so again, it's important to do as much research as possible. Generally, your counselors at Leverage Edu would already be knowing of scholarships which are readily available. So there are generally two kinds of scholarships. There would be one scholarship is where you need to apply in advance. So generally for that you need to put in your university application early on, and following your application you need to make the application for the scholarship, and there may be an essay, and generally those tend to be quite competitive in nature. So it's important that you put in those applications in early and you find out which universities are having those big scholarships which you can probably apply for. So this is one way. This is one of the important variants of scholarship. And then the second variant of scholarship is an automatic scholarship. So a lot of universities actually give scholarships to to students of different nationalities. So for example, like we have a lot of universities which are giving £3,000 or £2,000 scholarships to many Indian students, which for which you don't even need to apply, but it would automatically be deducted from your tuition fee. So it's important to talk to your counselors and get this information from them, and that would result in a good drop in your tuition fees if you kind of do your research well. The other two main factors which come into consideration when considering costs would be like food, like I mentioned, and accommodation. So when it comes to food, um, it's obviously a lot cheaper if you rather than eating out all the time, if you actually cook. So learning how to cook is an important skill. I think the most important skill of learning of going abroad would be learning how to cook. It would help you to save a lot of money, because if you're planning to order in, you could actually end up spending, even if you're ordering fast food, you would end up spending like $5 to $10, on each and every meal that you actually order. But But if you cook, the cost becomes hardly maybe $1 or $2 or $3. So it drops significantly. So cooking is very important. It's also important for you to buy your groceries from the correct places. So in the UK, for example, there are well-known supermarkets, but some tend to be cheaper than the other, right? So if you go to for example, Asda is a very famous budget place where people go to buy their expenses. And then you have high-end grocery stores as well, but the end amount that you end up paying can be significantly higher. So it's important to choose the correct place when you go to shop for groceries. That's also really important. Lastly, when it comes to food, obviously it becomes difficult to cook all your meals all the time, and this is where I think it's very beneficial to live in a flat with the other flatmates, because how it would work is that you would generally each contribute to or maybe you could allocate different days where each of your flatmates would maybe cook a meal, and it becomes slightly easier to um, manage the entire cooking process, right? Maybe there could be some days where you cook and your flatmates clean, and some days where they cook and you clean. So it becomes a lot easier that way. These are the first two main things that I wanted to discuss. So tuition and food. And lastly, I think accommodation is something which I think most students actually don't have too much knowledge about. But it does, like I said, it does contribute to about 25% of your expenses when going abroad. So it is important to understand accommodation very well, because if you make the right decision, you could actually, like I said, if you, for example, if you share a flat with flatmates, you could actually save a lot of money. So it's important to understand what are the different types of accommodations and options, and also how you could use that best to your advantage, right? So when it comes to accommodation, generally students would either end up either staying on campus or they would stay off campus. If you stay on campus, generally it tends to be a bit more expensive because you have obviously smaller, the rooms are a lot smaller, and living on university, the charges are just generally higher, and you generally have self-catered meals. So the university generally will provide you meals, but all inclusive, it turns out to be more expensive. So if you are on a budget, I would suggest not to live maybe on campus. At the same time, I would suggest not to live too far away from campus. For instance, a lot of people end up staying in the main city area, and getting expensive flats in the main city. But it's important to consider that if you live in the city, the rents are higher, and secondly, if you're traveling to the university campus frequently, you may have to shell out a lot on transport. So it's always better to live not on campus but not too far away, but slightly off campus. That's the ideal thing to do if you're looking to budget. Generally, those accommodations which are slightly off campus tend to be in walking distance, so you can actually walk to the campus. You don't even need to take a bus or anything, and the rents tend to be lower, and you can also get flats which are which comprise of maybe 3 people or 4 people or 5 people, even a house with 6 or 7 people staying with you, and obviously that lowers your cost significantly. That also means that you can share a kitchen, maybe share cooking duties where each of you can cook for each other on separate days. um, so yeah, staying right off campus is it's a super good tip to saving money. If you're staying too far away, you could also end up spending a lot of money on transportation. So you don't want to spend too much money on taxis, because taxis can be pretty expensive. So these are the three main drivers which I wanted to cover. Besides this, some random quick tips and points on saving money when going abroad would be to obviously, like I said, staying close and not using too much of taxis is a way to save on money. So you could like maybe get a bicycle and bicycle to the campus. It could also be a great way to actually work out, and get some exercise in at the same time. You should use the bus. When required to use taxi, you can always share a taxi with your friends. So maybe a taxi fare which would cost you $6 or $7, if you share it with 3 or 4 of your friends, it becomes just $1 each, right? Which becomes as much as public transport. So that's definitely something which helped me when I was studying abroad. Um, Other tips which probably could help you is, I would suggest, when it comes to buying books. So books are something which students generally end up spending a lot on, because you're going to have various different classes, and each of them may have some uh, requirement of certain books. So what I used to do was, I actually had friends who were in the class above me, and a lot of them had attended the same classes which I did. So I could actually buy second hand books from them and borrow their books, rather than actually purchase new ones. So that's a good tip for people who are planning to go and study abroad. So I would find out how to get your hands on those second hand books, right? Either from seniors, or or through common Facebook groups or something of that sort. You could also look at maybe borrowing from the library. So every university has a library, and it's possible that a lot of the books that you require may already be available there, right? So it's worth a look. And you can also look and see if the books are actually available online, so you don't actually have to purchase them, right? um, besides books, in terms of shopping, I would say, you can, when you do shop for, say, if you are planning to go to the UK or Canada, and if it is, like, significantly cold, you may want to buy some warm clothes. You may want to shop from time to time. It's important to know which are the good places, student friendly prices, shops which have student friendly prices, to kind of shop when it comes to especially clothing. So like in the UK, for example, you have Primark, which is very, very cheap, and it costs maybe just £1 or £2 to buy a t-shirt, or to buy socks. So it's important that you do your shopping from the correct places. Nowadays, I'm sure there must be a lot of cheap places where you can actually order online as well. So again, this is something which you can find out from the local people once you're there. Um, Lastly, I would say, when it comes to going abroad, I think um, there are many student discounts which are available. Generally, most universities tend to be student towns, and hence there are a lot of student discount cards and a lot of student discounts available. There are a lot of student nights out. You get student discounts even at the movie theater, at restaurants, from ordering in, and even if you plan to go out for a drink, there are student nights out in particular, which tend to be really, really cheap. So it's almost like they sell drinks at almost one third of the price. So it's important to plan your outings, as using all of these student discounts and keeping all of these things in mind. And I think that should help you to save a significant amount of change. Um, so I think that's these are some of the main key points that I actually just wanted to share. So thank you very much, guys, and please do tune in tomorrow for another session of Leverage TV. Bye.